All right, y'all. Welcome to the Happiness Summit. I'm Sean Marshall. I'm your host. If this is your first time tuning in, we are discussing happiness, and there's many different avenues and things that I think are important to happiness. And I also want to get a take from experts who are rocking it and living a happy life to contribute to this conversation. So tune in, take some notes, connect to your heart, and let's see what wants to come through for you today. With that being said, I'm excited for today's guest. Come on, Krystalore Cruz. I typically don't just read a straight bio, but I want to read your bio because I like the way that it's written and it's very powerful. So, Krystalore is a 22-year United States Air Force veteran, former NFL cheerleader, 26-time marathoner, fitness and resilience coach, motivational speaker, best-selling author, and leadership consultant who also at one point in her life had cancer, overcame cancer, and was also wheelchair bound. So, Krystalore, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Sean. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, great. Likewise, I'm glad to have you here. So I'd love to have you introduce yourself as well, is this I can hear from you. And then if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to share your story, some of your background that got you to doing the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a holistic wellness coach at its core, right? So the really working with the mind, body, and spirit. And we really help, I love to help people put themselves and their health first for just 34 minutes a day. So we can reduce the stress and overwhelm of life and live a more fulfilling life. So that's at the root of everything I do. So when I put my 2 feet down every single morning, no matter what I do, whether it be group coaching, fitness, consulting, speaking, writing, or with my private clients or hosting retreats. That is my mission to help empower people, to give them the tools that they need to be successful, to develop the healthy habits, to be happier, live healthier, and leave a legacy and still live the life that they desire today in current state and not wait till it's too late, not wait till retirement. And I share that because part of my story is a lot of times throughout my life, my whole adult life, my military career, I actually put myself on the back burner.
Yeah.
And so I know this feeling firsthand. And it first started when I was an NFL cheerleader in 2005. So it's been almost 24 years now, right? And I
Yeah.
was in a toxic, abusive relationship at the time. I was, climbing the corporate, no, I was actually at that time, I was in my senior year of my undergrad and I was working out all the time. I was an NFL cheerleader, going to school, driving all over, checking in at the gym, doing all of these things. And I really wasn't taking my health and fitness seriously. I was just overworked 24/7. And then I was in this toxic, abusive relationship at the same time. So the people in my corner were not supportive of the work that I was doing. And I was exhausted. And that was the time that I ended up waking up on November 1st of 2005, where my right baby toe was just bright red and hot and very painful.
Huh.
And yeah, so that was pretty traumatic, pretty because when you have to work out for 4 hours a day and you can't even put your foot in a shoe in Buffalo, New York, that's a tough time. And so I share this story with you because what happened was what I'm used to doing, especially in the military, they say rub some dirt on it, suck it up. Just,
Yeah.
we're used to just like, you know, just working through the pain, right? And so I
Stop
kind
crying,
of did
man.
that
That's
for
what that.
what's that?
It, Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, I'm in the was military as well. It's like stop crying. We don't want to hear that crap. Keep on moving, dude. Do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Mission first, mission. Let's go. Let's go. Suck it
Hmm.
up with your emotions, check them at the door. Right. So that is what my most of the last 22 years of my adult life. I just retired in April. And so that was kind of what I was used to doing, right? And so it wasn't until a couple months later where I was like, okay, I'm going. And then my right knee started hurting, and then my left knee, and then my
Mm.
right shoulder, and then my left shoulder. And then I ended up with lockjaw for 3 months. My
Wow.
entire body shut down. I couldn't even walk. I had to eat out of a straw. And I was 22 years old. I was an I was a professional athlete, an NFL cheerleader. I was, at that time at 22, I was in the best shape of my life. And on the outside, on the
Hmm.
inside, I was broken. And they ended up putting me on a lot of different medication. They tried to figure out what was wrong with me. And I ended up spending 6 months in a wheelchair. And I share this
Ah.
because a lot of times people look at me now, fast forward 20 years later, 24 years later, they see the six-pack abs and the cute hair and the shiny face and the highlight reel. I've been knocked down a couple times. And so I want to really start with that in mind because as we discuss, the system that I've developed over the years, it seems simple, but when you're in the muck, when you're literally shopping for your first apartment in a wheelchair, it seems like there's nothing left. That this is it. Right? And so I want to share that because I really thought that that was it, that that was going to be the rest of my life. I had a pill box that was this big, AM and
Jeez.
PM. I had to take so much medication. They gave me chemotherapy and injections that were refrigerated that I had to use to be able to walk. And so I was burning ulcers. I had sores. It was horrible. And I gained a bunch of weight in that wheelchair. And I'll never forget, like I had to crawl to the kitchen in the morning. I could not put my 2 feet down. And so now I don't take that for granted. But back then I had to crawl to get back up. I had to fight for my life. I had to have a voice and advocate for myself. I got out of the toxic relationship. I started questioning my doctors when they told me, well, suck it up, stop working out so much, stop wearing those fancy shoes. You're doing
Hmm.
too much, slow down. And I'm like, no, there's really something wrong with me. My body was like fighting itself. And I ended up getting diagnosed with a really rare form of rheumatoid arthritis. And so that medication actually ended up being the cocktail that allowed me to be able to walk and to move. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Now they said, you're going to be on this medication for the rest of your life. And I was like, well, whatever's going to give me the least amount of pain and keep me moving again, because I need to get back up on the field. We don't have time for this.
Yeah.
And so I was like, finally, we found the sauce, the secret sauce, that cocktail. Until I got a phone call from the air base because I just retired from the United States Air Force, and they said, "Hey, that medication you're on, not allowed in the military. So that's great that it's healing you, but we're going to kick you out." So
Wow.
yeah, just 3 years into my military career, as I was just building, I was just, I was NFL cheerleader, top of the top, to I'm no longer an athlete. I gained so much weight. I have ulcers and it was horrible. And I got out of the abusive, toxic relationship. So I was grieving that relationship. Oh, and by the way, we're going to kick you out of the military. So all of your identities, all of my identities were taken, like just like that. And what that does to you, a human at any stage of life, but especially at the young age of 22, I didn't have coping mechanisms back then. I didn't know what life looked like. It was 2005. There wasn't Dr. Google, or we didn't really have Facebook back then
No,
to
we
phone
didn't.
a friend. I read
No.
Arthritis for Dummies, like the black and yellow books, like anything for
Yeah.
dummies. That's how I learned. And so
Huh.
fast forward, I studied nutrition, anti-inflammatory diets, the power of movement. I got therapy, and I started building tools to get back up again. And just fun fact, I did just retire after 22 years in the military. So good news is I got off of all of that medication. It took an entire year, but I advocated for myself and I got off of all the medication. And then I started running. And so you said in my bio, I ran 26 marathons in a 50-mile
Yeah.
race. I do not have pain currently to this day, and I do not take any medication, and I don't even take ibuprofen. So that's the power of the inner work, healing from the inside out, advocating for myself, standing up and having a voice. and studying nutrition and hydration and the power of movement and mental and physical well-being. So that, I know that's kind of a long story to bring you to kind of where the work that I do today, but that is one instance out of several that I could probably share with you throughout our time together that, the work works when we do the work is what I tell my clients. And that's a main theme is when you do the work and you put in the work and you advocate for yourself and you show up for yourself and your health, you're going to start to see results. And it's just sometimes you just got to get back to basics and then work from there.
Yeah, powerful. Wow, there's a lot to cover there. Okay, so walk me back. Okay, let's go back to 22. You're an NFL cheerleader. I want to ask you some stuff about that. But what my first question I want to ask is, uh, did that end your career as a cheerleader, or did you end up going back? So that was the end of cheerleading for you.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And as a young adult, that is the pinnacle, right? When you make it to the NFL, I was a
Yeah.
dancer, I was a gymnast, I was a cheerleader all through middle school, high school, and then in college, and then I made it to the NFL, and then boom, that was it. 1 year. I gained so much weight. I actually did try out again. A lot of people don't know this story. I've been really fearful of sharing this actually. So I'm going to share it with you. I
Okay.
actually
Yeah.
got cut the second year. I went back after I got off the medication, but I was not the same person.
Yeah.
I was overweight. I was untrained. I wasn't the person I was prior. I was broken. I was in a bad headspace. And so I actually got cut the second year. I did go back and try out.
Wow. Okay. I definitely appreciate you sharing that. Okay. Let me organize this on my side. Tried out, got cut.
Sure.
Tell me this. It's funny we're talking about this. I was just talking to my friend yesterday, good friend of mine. Her name's Crystal too, actually. Crystal, not Krystalore. She runs a business in LA. She works with a lot of NFL players. She's a high level chef. She was like Will Smith chef and Kanye West and Black Eyed Peas. And then she got an NFL contract. So she's doing all this stuff and she does all this cool stuff with kids. And her daughter is a really high level gymnast and she's in third grade. So she's a little girl. And she's so good that the coach said she has everything it takes to go all the way. And then Crystal's friend is an Olympic silver medalist, so she understands the work ethic that only a professional athlete would understand. And she looks at her daughter and is like, "Your daughter has what it takes to go all the way." So she's training like 5 hours a day. So I'm getting an image of that for you. Did you have an upbringing similar to that? You make it to the NFL as a cheerleader, the highest you can go. What was your upbringing like in terms of dance and athletes and stuff like that?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that I started dancing the day I could walk. So I was 2, my mom put me in dance. And then I danced all through, as a kid. And then I got to high school, like middle school and high school, and I was like, I want to try all these different sports. So fun fact, I played soccer. I tried soccer, didn't like that. Softball, we did more singing than actual playing on the field. So my parents hated that. So I stopped doing that. I was a catcher. I wore all the equipment and I'm a small
Okay.
human, 4'11" and 3/4. So I basically tried everything. And then I played singles tennis in high school. I was on the bowling team. I'm actually really good at
Wow.
bowling. You wouldn't see. Yeah. Uh-huh. So I was in choir. So I was a singer and a soloist. So really, I was trying to find that one thing. And what it always came back to was dance and the power of movement and just like being free in the art of moving my body and performing. So I
Yeah.
always loved that. And so it really wasn't a goal of mine per se in the beginning to be in the NFL. It wasn't like as a third grader, I'm going to be in the NFL. That is one straight shot. Now, what's interesting though is my aunt was an NFL cheerleader. So
Okay.
we cheered for the Buffalo Bills. So go Bills.
Go
I grew up
Bills.
in Buffalo, New York. So I know that's always the first question. Which team? So
Yeah.
my aunt actually cheered in 1993 and went to the Super Bowl. That was the last time they went.
Okay.
So
Wild.
yeah, so I saw
Oops.
her be a leader and a community leader and a local celebrity, right, in our town. And it just never clicked with me that that would be me. until I got to college and I was a competitive athlete. Like I was competitive in
Wow.
cheerleading and then indoor track. I was sprinting. I was a hurdler, the smallest hurdler on the planet. I'm not 5 foot yet. So I just was like, try something to defy all odds kind of a gal. And I'm like, tell
Yeah.
me I can't and I'll do it. The only thing I didn't try was volleyball and basketball because of my height. But everything else, you name it, darts, bowling, like I was like relentless pursuit of something that's going to set my soul on fire. And dance and performing was that.
Yeah, wow. So you're athleticism, sports galore. Okay, so I wanna highlight that because I think that's really important. And there's different identities, but you mentioned identity earlier. So what happens for you mentally and emotionally when on some level, I'm guessing you're defining who you are at this point by your career, by being a cheerleader. I'm the best. I'm with the Bills. Like, let's go. And then you can no longer even be on a team, right? And then you try again the next year, you get cut. But it seems like at that point, you already recognize you're a different person. But can you, I know somebody's listening who either just is gone through a big change and they're attempting to figure out who they are without maybe their husband that they had or without the career they had or something like that, or somebody's wanting to go through that and they haven't like fully figured it out. So can you walk us through that process for you of what was it like to shift identities, let go and start over?
Yeah, so I think initially, like I said, at 22, I didn't really have a lot of skills and tools in my tool belt. Personal development really wasn't a thing. Emotional intelligence, what I study now, and those tools. So at that time, I was like, I'm gonna push, I'm gonna get busy. I focused on my career. And so I was like, I am going to try to prove myself in other ways. And I think that is one condition of an identity shift. We try to prove ourselves in other
Mm-hmm.
ways to try to really shift into a new identity. And so I will say that was one thing that I tried that it doesn't work too often. It's really,
Yeah.
it really wasn't until later on I've had several identity shifts in my adult life. Um, I was active duty for 10 years. So I ended up going active duty. Fast forward, I won't tell you my whole life story, but I was building my career, my military career, and I ended up in 2008, 2009, I was working for HSBC. I was a licensed broker for HSBC. I was a branch manager and I was climbing the corporate ladder. And I had then we had the 2008, 2009 crisis, the housing crisis. And I called my recruiter at the Air Force because I was working part-time with the Air Force at the time. And I said, hey, do you have full-time jobs in the Air Force? They said, yeah. Oh, we have this opportunity for you. So I ended up going full-time. So I was active duty for almost 10 years. And so I really poured myself into my military identity. So I just want to share that was a very quick space between a couple years of that NFL like into the military. I was like, I'm gonna get my health back, and then I'm gonna get my career back.
Yeah.
And so I did that. And then it wasn't until I met my husband, where in 2016, we met, and well, actually, it was 2014 that we met. 2016, we got orders and we had to move away from everything. I had to move away
Mm.
from my home, my friends, my family. So once again, that identity shifted. Now, there was where I really lost myself
Mm.
because I had
Okay.
been growing this identity of like, hey, I am successful because I wear this uniform. And
Mm-hmm.
success was, how much I could do, how much I could serve, how much I could give back. And, obviously a paycheck as well, but moving through the ranks, that was always like going after, going after, going after more and more and more and more and more and more, and more. And so when that was gone, and I had to move away from my network, my friends, my family, everything. That's when I really lost myself again. And so it was in those moments where I had to say, okay, I spent 6 months without a job. I'm now a military spouse. I moved away from my friends and family. I gave up my career for my husband. And I moved to a tiny little town where I know nobody. and no one will hire me because I'm either overqualified or too military, and we're not like the military. And I got so much discrimination that I was like, I'm done. And I ended up going on LinkedIn and I was like, okay, I'm going to start networking online. And I found a life coach for transitioning veterans. And she asked me some powerful
Ah,
questions. And that's where I said, okay, what can I do with the tools and the experience and the skills that I have? And I always joke that the answer was not a job. It wasn't what the
yeah.
guidance counselors told me. It was not in the military. It was entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And that having that freedom and flexibility to be my own boss was exactly what I wanted to do. And so there lies the journey of entrepreneurship over the last almost 7 years now.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. Um, Let me ask you this too, because I want to talk about the condition that you had. You know, you're in so going back to 22, you're an NFL cheerleader, toe, pinky toes bright red one day. It turns into your knees, your shoulders. Pretty soon, you're in a chair, drinking out of a straw. What, you're saying at this point, you're going and going and going and going. From your perspective, what did you discover about where that came from? What was the like root cause of all of that?
Well, I now know because I study psychology now and certified in a lot of different modalities to help trauma, right? And so a lot of these are patterns of
Yeah.
childhood trauma and things that have come up that force us to continue to push or busyville or people pleasing or perfectionism. So now, fast forward, I'm more aware now of these patterns, but at the time, I didn't realize what was actually happening to my body. It was a traumatic response, and I was grasping at anything for attention, for clout,
Hmm.
for success, for proving. And just so at that time, I didn't really have the skills that I do now. So I can't judge myself back then. But in those moments, we were like, I think the biggest thing, the best thing I could have done in is got therapy. And because I was full time in the military and it was taboo back then,
Hmm.
mental health, taking care of our mental health was not a priority. And so I went into Busyville, perfectionism, pushing, pleasing, doing more, 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 when really what I needed to do was get in community, get therapy, get coached, get a mentor, and get the support that I needed to heal from the relationship so I don't repeat those cycles. And I repeated those cycles until now, because now so until we're going to continue to harbor a lot of this stuff. So for those people that are out there that are like, holy cow, my world just like rocked, like just completely, the rug got pulled out from underneath me. There's an illness, there's an injury, there's a diagnosis. I've had a cancer diagnosis too, because guess what? I didn't listen the first time. So God's like, knock, knock. You didn't live the
Yeah.
first time. You didn't sit down and listen. We're going to give you another one and then another one. So I had cancer in 2019, and that's when I started to pay attention. And then most recently, I had a horrible betrayal of my husband. And so there's a lot
Okay.
happening where it can really rock you. And so if you don't take the time, and I've found if I didn't take the time to really heal and reset and get curious of what's happening in my body and in my heart and the connection between what is really happening in our ecosystem, because our body is going to, they say the body keeps score. It's a beautiful book. The body keeps score, right? And it will give you clues and it will yell at you, and you will continue to have clues and challenges and diagnoses and injuries until you start to pay attention. And I have learned firsthand the hard way. So that's why I do what I do to help prevent people and have a preventative maintenance plan is what I like to call it. Your preventative medicine, your preventative maintenance plan, so that when life gets thrown at us, we're unstoppable, unshakable, unbreakable, and able to bounce back quicker.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people have come on the show and have gone uber successful millionaire, 10 million, killed it here, killed it there. And then in the process, like ruined relationships with their kids, ended up sick, ended up cancer, deathbed. It's a pattern. It's a pattern. And then it's like, oh crap, it's time to reset and get right spiritually, emotionally, mend relationships, get in the heart, and then it's a whole new beginning from that. So I really appreciate you sharing that, especially the childhood stuff, perfection. What's interesting too, Krystalore, is when I do these events and I'm interviewing 10, 12, 15 people, their themes come through that I don't anticipate until it happens. It's like energy, right? Attract to certain people, and then these themes start to come through. And one of the themes that's coming through on this series is toxic relationships. So I appreciate you can. So what I want to ask you about that, because this is something I hear. I had no idea we were going to talk about this in this interview series, but it's here. I want to talk about it. I get emails often from people in my audience, and I have clients that are in toxic relationships or have been in them, and they're still putting pieces together. So it's very common. And I know that when you found yourself in a toxic relationship, in your 20s, and then you eventually realize you leave, can you walk us through that part of the journey? Seems like there are all these things going on at once, and that was one of them. So I would love for maybe somebody's listening and they're in one now, or they haven't put the pieces back together of the one that they were in. Would you mind sharing that part of the journey as well? What'd you discover? What was it like? How'd you get through it? Who'd you become as a result?
Yeah. So that's really when I discovered journaling. So I actually wrote letters because I found that writing, I process by speaking, mostly. And so, phone a friend, get therapy, get coach, get a mentor. Like that is always my first mode. Now that wasn't always my first mode. So I wrote letters first to this man, right? Because I was like, I can't get it out, and he was physically choking me too. So like there's that. And now as a speaker and as an author, you can't shut me up. Because
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
able
you
to
got your
break
voice
free.
back. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, writing letters allowed me to process all of my human experience and feel heard and feel like my words matter, because I was told that it didn't matter. I was told to
Mm.
sit in the corner and not speak till spoken to. It was
Like
just, I
growing
was
up, that was
so,
like, sorry to cut you off. Like, was that growing up, like mom and dad or something like that told
no,
you sit?
it was actually in the military.
That was the military. Okay. Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
I
was not
understand.
only,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was not only, I had toxic supervisors, and also the man at home too. So this was
Yeah.
it was coming from all angles. My parents, though, were very supportive, and they just wanted me
Oh.
to be happy and healthy, right? And so they were willing to do whatever it took to support me. So I ended up writing to feel heard and to feel like my words had value. And so this actually plays a huge role. I want to just share this. As a performer and as a dancer, I've recognized that it was an individual, very internalized sport. And even as a runner, too, marathon runner, right? So all of this is very internal. And so I spend a lot of time with myself. And so when we don't process our emotions or get them out in a healthy way, they build up, right? And that's where anxiety and like the stress and overwhelm comes. And so I found that all the time because I was internalizing a lot. As a performer, I would just, and as a dancer, I would perform, right? And that's how I got it out. That was my expression, because I couldn't use my voice, or I didn't feel like I could. And I
Mhm.
wasn't conditioned to have the thoughts in my head and asked for my opinion, right? And so it wasn't
Yeah.
until later on um, where people would ask me, why do you run so much? Why don't you slow down? And I was like, no, I have to keep going because my life depends on it. Right. And then a couple of people finally said, no, like, really, what, did something happen? And I'm like, well, why do you ask? Because I just kept going. Right. I never really told a lot of people my story because I didn't think my words mattered. And so when you're in toxic relationships, I found that it can beat us down so much that we feel that our words don't matter anymore. And so we can mute and isolate and just feel so alone.
Mhm.
And so for anybody that's out there that feels this way, you're not alone. And it's normal for you to feel this way if you are in a toxic relationship. And so I will say journaling has been really powerful for me. And then no wonder my very first book, my self-published book, was the Crystal Clear Life Planner. It's a 90-day action plan to embrace chaos and live a fulfilling life, because journaling is what saved my life. Journaling is what helped me process the daily reflections of what was happening in my body and the emotions. And then finally, I got the courage to get therapy. And so I don't always recommend this, but I lied. I lied to the person that was in my household, and I said, I'm going to dinner with friends, but really I was paying for therapy with money I didn't have. And so that was the most powerful thing, is that hurts me that I had to lie to go to therapy. Like,
Mhm.
that's kind of odd, right? So you shouldn't. And
Yeah.
for those of you that are out there that, you know, that you feel like you need to have a voice and you're not being heard and you need a professional, I highly recommend go do it, invest the time. And it doesn't have to be forever, but if you find the right person, it is magical. And I just want to share, Sean, too, real quick. You mentioned the Olympic, and we were talking about gymnasts, and that
Yeah.
whole we're here in the Olympics, and Simone Biles is just crushing it. I just want to
Yeah.
share that she has such a powerful message too. And I watched her documentary last night about her mental health struggles, and I feel that since 2020, a lot of people have been isolating. A lot of people have
Yeah.
recognized that they may be in toxic relationships or toxic situations or toxic jobs or supervisors, right? It doesn't just have to be the person that your spouse, right? This can actually be a family member, your blood family member. It can be someone in your home that is just sucking the life of you out of you and zapping your energy and your space. And so we need to do whatever it takes to maybe take a step back. And I always say, get back to basics. And like, I just applaud Simone. I watched her documentary last night. And side note, I don't have a television. That's one of the things that brings me joy. I don't have a television. So I actually subscribed to Netflix on my computer last night just to watch this, because
Wow.
her story to me is so powerful. For someone at that level to tap out in 2020 at the tide of the height, and it's a lot of pressure to live this certain way, to have the perfect marriage, to have the perfect body, to have the perfect everything. And it's such a courageous and powerful decision to say, you know what? I need help. And I'm going to take the time to make sure that my mental and my physical well-being is top priority first, so that I can pour in and come back stronger and be a better mom, be a better sister, be a better brother, be a better friend, be a better business owner. And that is so powerful in these moments when we're losing our identity. Like, we feel that we have to keep up with the Joneses and keep up this perfect persona that everyone expects you to be. And I'll tell you, I moved to the beaches of Puerto Rico a week before Christmas with 10 suitcases by myself to heal. And everyone's like, you're crazy. You're moving to another country. I'm like, well, Puerto Rico is still the United States. But I did it alone, powerfully, because I knew that I needed to take a step and not go into Busyville, not go back to my parents, not go back to my hometown, not pour myself into, happy hours and dating and all that stuff. I did it so that I can give myself the space and the place to heal and get back to basics.
I love that. Yeah. I was really curious about that part too. So I appreciate that you say that. There's this big shift that has to happen from the perfectionism. You keep saying Busyville, which I love that. I love that word. I hadn't heard that. Uh, Proving yourself, geez, cancer, the betrayal. Um, and you had to slow it down. You had to slow it down. Tell me this, because there are a lot of people going 1,000 miles an hour. And it's like, I remember there was a movie years ago where there was a bomb on a bus and the bus couldn't slow below 60 miles an hour. Otherwise the bomb was going to blow up. And it's like, there's a lot of people operating like that. And you were operating like that. What was the shift like? Like, what did you have to overcome as you started taking yourself on and slowing down? What was the stuff that you were avoiding internally that you'd find any reason to avoid it? What was that part like?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. I think
Yeah.
initially slowing down, I think I shared earlier, was a trigger word for me. It's like, you need to slow down. You need to stop
Yeah.
doing that. You need to stop working out, stop running. Your knees are going to hurt. So that, to me, that slow down was a judgment on the decisions that I was making that were healing me, right? That were making me happy. And I wasn't realizing that slowing down can allow the brain and the body to process in a healthy way to be able to come back stronger. And so it wasn't
Mhm.
until I started studying psychology and human development and human behavior and got certified in the DEI space where I literally had to, it was forced on me, right, to be able to
Yeah.
study. And the more that I studied the brain and how it works, the more I had to slow down and understand how fast I was making decisions and why I was in this. That was my default setting. And I started to understand the conditions that I was in the military, the conditions of the toxic relationship, that those were patterns that I started to understand. And the more I unpacked them, the more I had to slow down to be able to reframe and rewire the stories. And I say the stories because we all have that inner critic. The longest
Yeah.
conversation is the one we have with ourselves. So when we go through
Mm.
identity shifts, it's almost like that inner critic comes in really quickly. So as soon as we slow down, then the chatter comes, right? It
There's
is
room.
screaming
Yeah.
loud.
Creates room for that voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I always say devil loves an empty schedule. The enemy loves to creep in when you're alone. The enemy loves to attack us at our times when we're the most lonely and vulnerable. And what's been so powerful for me is staying in those moments and slowing down and getting curious about what is actually happening in the body and what is actually happening in the brain at these moments, that where these stories are coming from, so that we can have a heightened awareness to know what we can do about them. Because once we know, and they say like acceptance is step one, right? Like we need to sit with it, sit in the gunk,
Yeah.
slow down the process. And it's been really beautiful for me because now I can get curious and understand where these patterns and these voices and this chatter and this inner critic is coming from that are really nasty, that tell me lies, that keep me from showing up, keep me from my
Yeah.
happiest, healthiest self, and they self-sabotage. So we can kick them out. I always say we're going to kick them out. These voices are paying rent. If they're not paying rent and they're living rent free on my couch, and we're kicking them out. And so that's what I like to do with my clients is in a fun, healthy way, slow down that process and reframe to kind of flip the script, have some compassion with ourselves of where
Mhm.
these stories are coming from, compassion in the moment, compassion for perhaps that inner child from back then, back way back when, or maybe our parents, right? That they only had as much tools at the young age that they had you, right? So
Yeah.
this has been a beautiful discovery. The other thing I just want to share real quickly is that when we slow down, a lot of times that it feels lonely. And as a runner, I've been and a performer, like this has been natural for me is to process internally and find tools and ways to do it in myself. So journaling, meditation, running, and movement have been powerful, but also my own nutrition and my own hydration and my sleep routine. So I can only focus on what I can control and what I can manage with regards to my own ecosystem. And so often people are so afraid of being alone because they're so attached to everything else that thinks that is going to make them successful and happy. And I did that for a really long time. And so
Yeah.
getting quiet is a discipline.
Yeah.
Pulling back and slowing down is a discipline. And it's a tough discipline because it's uncomfortable. And it's also so beautiful on the other side. And I actually had a
Yeah.
client this morning who her husband actually has Lyme disease and he's suffering from dementia and he's actually slowing down and she's in fear of losing her husband. And so she gets in this like crisis mode whenever he has tough days because she's afraid of losing him. And so often we are so afraid of losing someone else and it shuts her down and zaps her of her own joy and happiness for days
Um,
because of this fear of being so attached to something or someone else. And I've learned about dependency and codependency and attachment styles, right? To recognize like happiness comes from within. And the more that we kind of slow down to detach ourselves, and I've had to do this work with my husband, right? And to know like I spent 10 years with him. We were the perfect couple, perfect everything. We were like model couples, like military Ken and Barbie, like every sense of the word. And
yeah.
for me to go from that to living in a 1 bedroom, like tiny little place, yes, on the beach to heal, I have stripped and I've had to find that happiness and slow down that process and recognize who am I with nothing else attached to it. And that is such a powerful question. And I ask myself that question every single day. And I think if more people can get curious and compassionate with where they're at, with nothing else, stripped of everything. I had a penthouse. I had a penthouse suite with floor to ceiling windows in the middle of the city. I had a Range Rover. I had, we had it all. And all that was gone, just like that. And now it's now I have like, what can I do with what I've got to bring joy to me every single day?
Yeah. Wow. I wanted you to share that as well. So that you just kind of went through that kind of, I mean, I don't know the timeline, but it seems like you just went through it or you're still going through it right now, perhaps
That was last year in
last
October.
year. Yeah. Wow. All right. I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. I know you're not alone in that. And I know somebody watching is also going through that or facing that or has faced it, hasn't moved back from it. In fact, I have a client who's running for office right now that went through something like that. And, you know, it's a big deal to move all the way to the other side of that. And I think it's funny, that's not funny, but what's funny is when you're talking about going inward and getting still and being with your thoughts and listening to the inner critic, it's one of the most scary things, and it's on default, it's one of the things that we want to avoid the most. Like, we'd rather run ourselves into the ground than sit here and sit with our thoughts. Like, are you kidding me? Sit with my thoughts? There's no way. They're like monsters in your head if you don't have a great relationship with them. And those thoughts, that inner critic seems so real. It's not real, but it seems real. It has the ability to make itself seem real, like a boogeyman seems real, but it's not. And there's a very power. You're right. It is a discipline to sit with your thoughts, to listen to them, to get curious about what's going on in there, and to ask that deeper question of who am I without anything attached to it, like you said. And without the thoughts is just a crazy record. It's going to go on and on and on if you give it the power. And you can also kick it out. Like you said, they're rent free. Kick it out. I say sometimes it's put in the back seat, but we're going, we're driving anyway. So I think
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful state. I know for myself, meditation took me a long time to be able to move past those thoughts and get to the other side of it. And I am on the other side of that. Not that I've mastered it. I mean, of course, my mind still goes crazy. It wants to go crazy. Sometimes this morning, it took me 20 minutes to get through the chatter because my mind wants to start planning and how am I going to work through this like in a productive way. But then I realized that's actually not productive for the meditation. Thinking is productive, but not in a meditation. So it took me 20 minutes to go through that this morning. And then I went another 20 minutes, and even another 20 minutes, I could still have gone another 20 minutes. But there's a beautiful world that opens up past that, when I unattach myself from those thoughts and all the chatter of what happened and what's going to happen, it's like, fuck all that. It doesn't matter. There's a beautiful
Yeah.
world that's happening. It's beautiful to connect to the energy and to yourself and all that. So I love that we're talking about that, because it's just so critical to slow down and get present. So thank you for everything that you shared. I appreciate that. We could do another hour or two, because there's a lot of questions I have for you, but I want to make sure before we wrap, this is like my favorite part of the interview, honestly. And the reason I say that is, I mean, selfishly, when we talk, that's what I love the most. But this part I say is my favorite part, because in this attention-based economy where our attention spans have become so short, people drop off. They tune in for 2 seconds, they didn't get what they needed, they bounce. They 10 minutes, they bounce. 10, 15 minutes, they bounce. But somebody stays, and somebody here's the message that you shared today, and it gets into their heart, and whatever they were doing prior to this didn't matter anymore, because they had to hear the message that you were sharing. So for that person, those people that are here right now, connected, listening, that would want to connect with you, I want to make sure they have an opportunity to do that. So you're going to offer a free gift for them. When I send this out, I'll link it so they can connect to you. But can you just take a minute and share a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I find that, part of my freedom formula is what I go through in a lot of my programs and with my clients is starting with a set of non-negotiables each and every day. And so the freedom formula is 5 C's. We have core, confidence, consistency, community, and celebration. Okay. So, we don't have time to go through all of those, but if you want to connect with me, I'd be happy to, help support you through that process. If you are in an identity, a season of change, or you're ready to level up and you're just feeling stuck, really getting back to basics is huge. And so what I have for you is a habit tracker, and it helps you determine what does a good day look like for you today to help you get the small needle making moves achievable today, so you can feel that dopamine kick, so you can feel accomplished and start gaining some momentum to get back again. So it's a free 30-day habit tracker. And so we'll drop the link in the show notes here so that you can get access to it. And then you actually get me for 30 days in your inbox, in your mailbox. And there's going to be some opportunities to connect with me throughout the month. And I'm happy to support you from there. There's plenty of options for us to work together, depending on your needs and your goals.
I love that. All right, cool. You guys connect, 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 connect. You're here. That's speaking to you. There's no such thing as later. It doesn't exist. That's the old version of you. The version of you that's going to make the change that you want to make, you got to start doing things differently. So take a moment now, go grab the gift, connect into Krystalore's world, and let it start working its magic for you. So for everybody that's here, appreciate you being here. And then Krystalore, thank you. Share so much. Paint a beautiful picture of what the journey that you've been, the military life. I absolutely relate to that, especially during that. I was late 90s to early 2000s, and it was a whole different game, So appreciate you sharing all that, and even what you're going through and what you have gone through most recently too. So thanks for coming and sharing your heart. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chad.
Absolutely. See everybody soon.